What's up guys, Davenator 1, 2, and 2, it's list day! Woo! These are always fun to do, and I kinda can make as many as I want because there's always something I can put in a list. And today's gonna be my part 3 of my 4-part Exceed monster lists. There are so many Exceed monsters and so many different types that I had to break it up into 4 lists. The worst, the best non-rank 4, today's, which is going to be the best generic rank 4, and then the last one is going to be the best non-generic rank 4. Because when I made this list, it was going to be every rank 4 monster, but it was really hard to say, is Castel better than Lightning Chidori? I don't know, it depends on what deck you're playing. You can't make Chidori and everything, but it's really good and removes more cards from the field, so I don't know. So it was easier to break it up into generic rank 4s and not generic rank 4s, because it's my channel, I can do what I want. But anyway guys, let's get started. First, we've got Traptrix Rafflesia, the queen of the lollies. She might be a little girl, but she got a fat ass. I'm still going to jail. Like every other card on the list, she's a generic rank 4 and actually one of the few defensive rank 4s that we actually have in the game. The rank 4 toolbox, for the most part, is very reactionary. It deals with a card or cards on the field that you need to get rid of, but going first, it really didn't have very much to do, especially before we got Traptrix Rafflesia. What does she do? Well, she has material, she's unaffected by trap cards, which is great because that means that's one less thing that your opponent can use to get rid of her. Something like Solemn Strike can't negate her effect, so as long as she wasn't negated on summon, it's gonna be a little hard for your opponent to get rid of her, because like I said earlier, that ass though. Also, if you happen to be playing Traptrix, which you probably aren't, but let's say you are, other Traptrix monsters can't be killed by battle or card effect. That's cool because that's an interesting little self-protection for her theme. Also, except for herself, other Traptrix monsters can't be targeted by your opponent's card effects. So again, if you happen to be playing Traptrix, she's an excellent little boss monster. But her Exceed monster effect's the one that we care about and the one that everyone can use. Once per turn during either player's turn, quick effect! You can detach one material to send one whole trap card from your deck to the graveyard. And, upon her resolution, you can change her effect to the effect of the card sent as long as it was appropriate to do so. Like, you can't just send a bottomless during your opponent's turn, they have to have just summoned a monster. That's amazing! Things like Traptrix Traphole Nightmare, her in-theme trap card, Bottomless, and Treacherous are all very good trap cards. And unlike things like Serapha Knight, which are an extra deck monster that requires a specific main deck commitment, a la Garnet and Brilliant Fusion for instance, drawing the whole trap cards is not a big problem. You're just gonna set them and then use them like they were intended, unlike drawing a Garnet, which is pretty useless. She's actually a really powerful little card and a really solid number 10 slot. Alright, Gaga Cowboy. Now, before you guys say, Cowboy isn't even that good and a lot of people don't even run it anymore, bear with me. Because Exceed summoning is an inherent type of summon, you can pick what position he hits the field with. And interestingly enough, his gimmick is he gets to pick what effect he uses depending on the position he's in. A lot of people do forget he does have an attack position effect, which is kinda interesting. During your main phase, you can detach from him, and then when you enter your battle phase, a monster that he battles loses 500 attack and he gains 1,000, which means he can get over any monster with 3,000 attack power or less. That doesn't target, so that is actually pretty good. I guess Utopia the Lightning has kind of replaced this little effect that he has, but being able to do one more thing is always good and adds some utility to the card. But the one that we all know about, and the one I'm going to be talking about more, is his defense position effect. Burn your opponent for 800 damage. He is the king of the main phase too. The reason why this card is even on the list, despite the fact that 800 damage isn't that much, is because, and I'm pretty sure I can safely say this, that he has single-handedly won more duels than every other card on this list combined. Because every other card on this list doesn't have a win condition stuck to it. Sure, like any other monster, you can attack for game with all the other entries on the list, but the amount of times that it's happened is minuscule compared to how many times people have cowboyed for game. During your main phase 2, after a successful battle phase, if your opponent wasn't quite dead, like 800 or less life points, and you can make a rank 4 Exceed play, you can just burn your opponent for game. Now that sounds like a very specific situation, but it happens a lot. This card has earned his spot in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Hall of Fame simply because he single-handedly won more duels and is probably the most successful alternate win condition type card that we've ever had. Number 101, Silent Honor Arc. Number 101 is an amazing card, and when he came out, he was probably the best Exceed monster we had, at least the best rank 4. Sure, he's been power creeped a little, and a later entry on this list has kind of replaced him, however, that doesn't change the fact that he's still really good. And you can make an argument to run him in any rank 4 toolbox, simply because he does have different applications other than his counterpart. What does he do? You can detach 2 materials from him to target one face-up special summoned monster your opponent controls and attach it to this thing as material. That's an amazing type of removal because sending things to the graveyard or bouncing it to the hand is great, but a lot of things either do stuff in the graveyard or can just be played again next turn. Being stuck to him as material is a great way of getting it off the field because your opponent really can't do anything with it once it's stuck to 101. And he's not a one-trick pony. If he would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can detach a material from him to save his life, which is cool because you can actually use the one material you sucked up for something. This one little tiny caveat, plus an extra 100 attack power, is the one reason why people still argue that you should at least be running one 101 in a rank 4 heavy deck. And if you're running rank up magic like the 7th one, oh boy, you can go into his C101 form, and that card is just amazing. Holy shit. You guys even remember this thing exists? It's the tits. Ha, cool. Our first 3 level 4. The reason why he's even on the list, despite his summoning condition being a little awkward, is because he fills a niche that other rank 4s don't really have. You can detach 1 material once per turn from him to target 1 card in the field and destroy it. It doesn't matter its position, it doesn't matter what the card is, you can just get pop 1 card. The next closest thing we have to that is Diamond Direwolf, and half the time, Wolf has to suicide itself in order to do that, which is such a waste of advantage. This is really the only generic spot removal we have as a rank 4 that doesn't require some strange thing to happen. Too bad he's a 3 level 4. Cool thing is, though, as long as he has XYZ material, your opponent can't activate cards in response to normal or special summons that you conduct, not just his own summon. So pretty much it's Solemn Warning or bust. You can't bottomless this thing, and you can't Solemn Warning your opponent's next monster, so you better kill this thing when you can. He's got a Dark Magician stat line, so that's good enough for a beater, right? And if he's sent to the graveyard, you get a little extra utility if you're actually playing this in S-Knights. You get to special summon 1 from the graveyard. Overall, a really nifty little boss monster, and it fills a niche that we don't really have a better option for. Ooh, Abyss Dweller! Blah. Abyss Dweller is a really interesting card because it has the sole distinction of being able to claim that it can be made really easily by one deck and also absolutely obliterate that same deck. We're talking about Mermails here. Because what does this thing do? A generic rank 4 that if it happens to have a water monster attached to it as material, it gains an extra 500 attack power. Oh, and so does every other water monster on the field. That you control at least. And with things like Elder Entity Norden, as long as you're running Instant Fusion, every deck can utilize this ability. Which is cool because it makes him from 1800 to 22, which makes him a little bit harder to deal with. But what we care about is that quick effect, though. Once per turn during either player's turn, you can detach 1 material from this monster, and any effects that activate in your opponent's graveyard cannot be activated. This thing is great to play main phase 1 and then go into your battle phase in order to ensure a more safer battle phase so your opponent doesn't float into a bunch of crap. And being a quick effect means you can use its second material on your opponent's turn to stop them from making a comeback. Holy crap, what a great defensive card. Essentially turning like all your monsters into pseudo armadis and blocking out any deck that has a heavy graveyard reliance. This card is great and will always have a place in my extra deck. Alright, our other 3 level 4 on the list, Evil Swarm Ouroboros. Evil Swarms are interesting because they have some of the most powerful Exceed monsters we have, and Ouroboros happens to be the most generic. At 3 level 4, again, he's a little harder to make than the other ones on this list, like Deltros. However, you get a lot of bang for your buck on this one. At 2750, he's a bigger monster than Deltaros, and he gets 1 effect for every material he has. Once per turn, you can only use 1 of each of these effects, and you can only use each of them once while he's face up on the field, which means you can't just spam effect number 1 for the next 3 turns. You have to jump down the line. However, they're all really good, so that's really not a problem. Effect number 1. You target 1 card your opponent controls and bounce it to the hand. Doesn't have to be a monster, doesn't have to be a spell or trap, it's just a card. Doesn't even have to be face up, just bounce it. Great for getting rid of back row, that's like a battle trap. as well as dealing with boss monsters and things like that are harder to summon again next turn. And if you're going to OTK, putting stuff in the hand is almost as good as putting things in the deck. Effect number 2, send a random card from your opponent's hand to the graveyard. Oh, if you can make this card early, you can really put your opponent behind by knocking a card out of your hand. That's why that Monarch Erebus thing is so damn good if your opponent plays that first turn, because that makes second players starting with the same number of cards that first player is without actually being able to establish a board because there's already a board presence. That kind of setback is just obnoxious and can actually win you the game if played very early. And effect number 3, he's got a DD Crow. You can banish one card from your opponent's graveyard. You do get this kind of vibe that he's like, you bounce a card one turn, then you discard it the next turn, and then you banish it the third turn. But pretty much you can use those in any order that you want. I just love cards that can do so much. He's just a really cool card with tons of utility. 106 Giant Hand. Basically the only other defensive rank 4 that we got that's really any good. And he's a walking fiendish chain. Yeah! What does he do? Once per turn, during either player's turn, when an opponent's monster on their side of the field activates an effect, you can detach 2 materials from this card to target that monster. Its effects are negated. Also, it can't change its battle position, so if you knocked out a defense position monster's effect like Dante, it's gonna be stuck like that. With a 2000 attack defense spread, it doesn't really matter which way you place him in, so you might as well put him in defense mode, so you don't have to like really make any sacrifices when you make this thing turn 1. Again, if you can make this turn 1, it's better than doing nothing when you're playing a rank 4 deck, and if you can make this with Rafflesia, you're in a really good spot. And now that it got a reprint, it's not so absurdly expensive. Unlike this thing. Minerva the Exalted Lightsworn. This card is fantastic, but she's not that generic, so she's not higher on the list. What does she do? She's essentially rank 4 Dante. You get to detach 1 material from her and mill the top 3 cards off your deck, and then you get to draw a card for each card that was a Lightsworn card. So if you're playing like something like zombies and you just need to get cards in your graveyard, that mill effect is actually pretty good. But if you're playing Lightsworns, you can actually draw cards too, so she works best in a Lightsworn deck. And if she's destroyed by a card effect or battle by a card your opponent controls, she gets another 3 mills off the top of your deck. And for every one of those that's a Lightsworn card, you get to destroy 1 card on the field. It doesn't specify your opponent's cards, so that gives you some utility when you're popping your own stuff if you need to. Also, it doesn't target, so yes! Sure, destruction isn't the best way of removing stuff, but non-targeting destruction like Regeki and things is good enough. And at 2000 attack, 800 defense, she's begging to get run over. She's just like, come at me, bro. I know you want to attack me. You're not going to like it when you do. She gets the most utility in a Lightsworn deck, making her not the most generic card on the list, but being able to mill cards off your deck in any rank 4 deck could be useful, especially down the road when we get new cards and new archetypes. Ooh, number 2, Gustav Emeril. Gustav Emeril is an amazing card, and he's kind of retained his value over the years despite getting numerous reprints. And like any good XYZ monster in this game, he's got 2 different effects. You get to pick one you want to use. His first effect is interesting. By detaching 1 material from this card, you can shuffle 3 monsters from your graveyard into the deck to draw 1 card. Graveyard recursion is always good. Sure, putting 3 cards from your graveyard back into your deck can undo some setup that you might need, but sometimes you absolutely need the draw, and other times you need a card in your graveyard to be back in your deck so you can do something with it. This kind of mid to late game recycle ability makes him a very, very great card in your extra deck, and when you use him and when you needed him, he was great. His second effect is also pretty interesting, but like Minerva, it's only good in decks that actually run the cards to use it. You can target 1 non-effect monster in your graveyard and special summon it. Notice this says non-effect monster, not normal monster. That's a very, very important distinction. Things like Gemini monsters, that Spirit Blue Eyes card, Vanilla Fusions and Rituals, and Vanilla Exceed and Synchro monsters all count for this effect. As long as it doesn't have an effect, you can summon it from the graveyard with this ability. Obviously, Dark Magician comes to mind because that deck can super easily summon from the deck Summoner Monk to make this thing to summon back your Dark Magician, but tons of other decks can utilize this card as long as they play non-effect monsters and a rank 4 engine. It's at this moment in time I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for all of our fallen comrades on the Forbidden and Limited list. All but one of them is a rank 4 Exceed monster, which is a testament to the ease of summon and ability of these cards.
In the arms of the angel, fly
Rest in peace, our fallen comrades. Laval Chain, Exciton Knight, Shockmaster, and Teller Knight Ptolemaeus. All of you are excellent in your own little way. And most of you are well deserved to be on the ban list. Holy crap, are all of you freaking broken. Whoa! Evolvo Chain is a rank 4 that lets you mill one card out of your deck or top deck a monster. So good! There are so many decks that would absolutely love this card to be back because it lets you set up and get your deck moving so stupidly easily. Exciton Knight is a great comeback card. As long as your opponent has more card advantage than you, you can nuke their board. And it's once per chain, not once per turn, meaning if you can nuke their board once and something stops it and doesn't get rid of Exciton Knight, you can just do it again. Oh my god, the board clears. Take that, Pendulums. And Shockmaster. Oh boy, Shockmaster. At 3 level 4, he's a little harder to make, but you can declare spells, traps, or monsters, and your opponent can't use that shit next turn. Holy crap, Shockmaster locks out your opponent from pretty much doing anything. Call spells against spellbooks and watch him squirm. And Ptolemaeus, you trolly bastard, let rank 4 engines run Cyber Dragon Infinity. Because that's all they needed, right? Another amazing card in their extra deck, all because of your dumb effect. Well, that was depressing. On to number 1. Castel, the Sky Blaster Musketeer. Yes! This card is fantastic. He pretty much replaces almost the entire rank 4 toolbox because he's probably the best removal that we have in the game. And did you remember that he has 2 effects? Like Cowboy, where it depends what position he's in, Castel depends on how much material you detach. If you detach 1, you can Book a Moon 1 monster your opponent has. That's actually kind of good. A lot of people forget he can even do that, but being able to put one of your opponent's monsters face down, as long as it's targetable, is a great way of getting rid of things, because a lot of things have very high attack and pretty lousy defense. Also, sometimes you need to turn some stuff off, so putting it face down and keeping it out of the graveyard for a minute might be necessary. Sure, his second effect's probably almost always going to be better, but it's nice to have the first one just in case. But that second effect though, detaching 2, you get to target 1 face-up card your opponent controls and spin it back to the deck. Doesn't have to be a monster, it just has to be face up. Putting things in the graveyard, putting things in the banish pile, and putting things in the hand, don't immediately get rid of them because they're still accessible by some means, especially with certain decks. But putting it back in the deck is a great way of getting rid of it because a lot of decks can search a card once, but have a really hard time doing it twice. Which means your opponent's gonna have to work for it to get their card back, and it better be necessary. This card is just absolutely amazing at getting rid of things, and it totally gets around stupid floating crap in the graveyard and things like that. Anyway guys, let me know in the comments below what you guys think of the list. This one was really easy to do because all the good rank 4 monsters that don't have a weird summoning condition are all just like really good. So there wasn't really any thought to the whole thing. Anyway, let me know in the comments below what you guys think, and I'll see you guys next time for the non-generic rank 4 monsters. And remember, if you don't troll the meta, who will? I'll see you guys next time.
Oh, you make the wombo combo?
I do.
Oh, draw 2.
So I pop his card, and then